Welcome to the Healing Center Conversations podcast, where we create space for conversations that heal. I'm your host, Dr. Byron McClure, a nationally certified school psychologist. I, along with our special guests, will give you insight to promote collective healing by putting people first. Through weekly conversations with educators, psychologists, and healers, we'll discuss ways to heal, thrive, and live your best life. This is the Healing Center Conversations podcast. Welcome to the Healing Center Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Byron McClure, and we have a super special guest in the building, Britt Hawthorne. Britt, how you doing today?
Oh, I am feeling really good today. I am feeling especially relaxed and also responsive.
Ooh, explain that one for us.
Yeah, I feel, well, I've had an opportunity to listen to some of your episodes preparing for the podcast, and just listening to the episodes has kind of created some space. And I feel like in my body and in my mind. And whenever I have that space, it allows me to really just be responsive to a conversation, responsive to a situation in a very intentional way.
I love that. And as we kind of discussed during the pre-show, I'm excited to have this conversation. I did my little background, my little Facebook and social media stalking, and I'm excited. I think you are doing some exceptional things. I read your bio. It says Britt Hawthorne is an antiracist educator, teacher, speaker, visionary, and advocate. But above all of those things, your energy just permeates through your website, through your social media. So I'm excited to have this conversation. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, can you share a little bit about who is Britt Hawthorne?
Oh, I love this question so much because so much of anti-racist work really is about identity work. It's understanding who we are, and that's that kind of never-ending work. So I would consider myself a person, much like other folks, I'm just in a web of relationships, and I have multiple identities. I oftentimes try to remember, first and foremost, I'm the child of Maurice and Robin Pascal, and super proud to be their daughter. I'm a second-generation teacher, so I have been in the field of education my entire life. I love spending my time watching rom-coms and going to spin class. I recently got into spin class, so I'm really into that. If anyone is into personality tests, this will make sense. If not, it won't. But I'm an ISFJ on Myers-Briggs, and I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, so I'm the peacemaker. Are you a 9 too?
Interesting. I am a 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I am a 2. But I love the Enneagram. In a lot of my work, I talk about knowing your strengths and being able to talk about them. So this just brings me so much joy.
Yes, I am. And I've had to do a lot of work about being in harmony, making both my thoughts and actions really truly be peaceful and harmonious in a way, instead of kind of a topical sense of harmony. So if y'all are what are these letters and numbers? Just know I'm a deeply introverted person. Kind of sums that up. Trying to think. I love coffee. I start my day with coffee every single day. And I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I am a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a neighbor. And I also see myself as a visitor on Turtle Island, more specifically the traditional lands of the Atacapod Ishak people.
So what's fascinating listening to you speak is when I ask that question, not just on this podcast, but in my work as a psychologist, as an educator, especially to young people, especially to adults, people really don't have a strong understanding of who they are, which is one of the reasons why I like asking this question. But how did you develop your identity to be able to just say so beautifully who you are? Where did that come from?
Okay, so I am starting to get really energized right now because a big part of my work, I use the anti-bias education framework that was developed by Louise Derman Sparks and Julie Olson Edwards. And the very first goal is identity. And so with our learners, we want them to feel comfortable and confident in who they are. We want them to have pride for their culture, their family, their language, their neighborhood, and so on. But there's also goals for us as adults as well. And so that first goal of identity means that I also need to feel comfortable and confident in who I am. And so a big part of that is understanding both I have personal identities and also social identities. So personal identities is what will make me what I would consider myself as unique. How I like to spend my time, what I'm learning to do, my likes, my dislikes, all of those things make really who I am on a unique level. And then I have social identities, and we all do. And social identities is what connects me to larger groups of people, which is why sometimes people will call them group identities or social indicators. And so a part of doing all of that is like, I'm always thinking about, who am I? What experiences have I had, both because of my positionalities, but how does like the world also experience me? There's parts of me that I had language for right away. Like I knew early on, I would say, by upper elementary, I knew my racial identity was Black. Like those are very honest conversations my parents had with me. So I consider myself a Black girl with a white mom. So I also identify as Black biracial. But then there's other parts of me that I didn't have a language for. And that's just honestly because they were dominant identities in society, where we could always see them as the default or neutral. So it wasn't until my adult life did I know that I identified as cisgender. Like no one ever gave me that language, cisgender. I had the language for trans, right? So I had the language for other folks, but I didn't have the language for me. And so doing all of that work allows there to be this really beautiful place to figure out, well, where do I hold privilege and immunity? And then where am I disadvantaged? And wherever I hold immunity and privilege is really where I can do my allyship work or my accomplice work or my co-conspirator work. And the parts of me where I'm disadvantaged is really oftentimes the parts that I need to love on myself more, because society is either constantly erasing that part or misrepresenting that part or minimizing that part. And then there's parts of me, like I look at myself as just a mysterious being. And I'm always trying to find, like reconnect or discover parts of me that either I've forgotten, I've let go, or like I recently got into spin class and I'm like, who knew I like spin? I didn't, right? So I'm always kind of like approaching that with this level of curiosity and play that I would expect to with my learners too.
We're going to talk about this concept of play in a little bit because I'm really fascinated by that concept of work versus play. I would love to get into a little bit more of what inspires you. One of the things that I saw on your social media, you posted, I'm thankful for the nights that turned into mornings, friends that turned into family, and dreams that turned into reality. What was the inspiration behind this post?
Oh, yeah. So I stumbled across a very similar post back when like Pinterest was a thing. I don't know if you were ever on Pinterest and like got all these teaching ideas off of there. But it really resonated with me because of all the things that I'm really thankful for. That post sums it up. My partner often jokes that I'm a morning person, and I am a morning person. I don't think I'm a morning person, though, because of like some biological clock that's in me. I think that a part of me of becoming a morning person is like I really am truly thankful. And I think about that right when I wake up, of like night turned into morning. And I'm so thankful for that. And I think a part of that is just an experience when I was an early teen. I saw my mom battle cancer and really fight like hell, but she did lose the battle and she died. And so, but I saw her fighting for every single night to turn into a morning. I saw her fighting to celebrate one more birthday. And so I have just carried that with me. And so like, I fight, and I'm really thankful for all my birthdays. I'm thankful for my mornings. I'm thankful for my friends who have like seen me through some dark times, but also really show up for me, celebrate me, also give me the gift of truth like they were my sisters. And I'm a big dreamer. I think there's something really beautiful about dreaming. I dream at night. And I don't know if anyone else, do you remember your dreams?
Yes.
Okay.
I love dream work. So I love Carl Jung. I'm a Jungian. I listen to this podcast, so I love dream interpretation. So let's talk about it.
I know. I feel like that's one of those questions that you could like ask people to, like, do you remember your dreams? Because I'm not going to say it's controversial, but I feel like it's either people remember it or they don't. And I definitely remember my dreams. I took a psychology class in college. And did you have to like have a dream journal and write down your dreams for like 10 days or something? Did you ever do that project?
It's still a practice. It's still a practice that I do.
Okay. So
to this day.
So like right when I wake up, I always love to tell my partner, I'm like, do you want to hear about my dream? 9 times out of 10, he's like, no. Because they're so wild. They don't make sense, right? It's like this mashup of things like, and there's just kind of no like real sequence to it, and the parts in the dream, like the characters in the dreams, wild. But anyways, so I'm a big dreamer at night, but I'm also a really big daydreamer too. And I love to daydream. Sometimes I'll dream and I'll think about like, what is it that I want to accomplish if skill, resources, time weren't a thing? And I'm 33. So I would be like, I would be on the United States gymnastics team. Lord knows I can't even do like a backflip. But I would be on the team. And then sometimes my dreams are really based in reality of like knowing my set of skills or things that I can learn to do.
Yeah.
What is it that I want to accomplish? And I have a book that's coming out in June, but that was a dream that has really turned into reality.
And I love the concept of dreams, whether it's, our actual dreams at night, if it's daydreams, if it's big ideas. Part of the work that I do, I've built out is called the Dream Team. So I love the concept of dreaming. I had a conversation a few weeks ago with, she was a former superintendent of schools, and she says, we're past dreaming big. We have to have God-sized dreams. And I was like, whoa. And that just took this concept to the next level for me. I would love if you could share, is there one dream that is just on your mind that you've just analyzed nonstop? Do you have one of those dreams?
Oh gosh, there was this one, and I was at a weird carnival, and it was like the animals were people, but at times they were animals, but at times they were people. And I guess when I say they're people, it means like I had the ability to communicate with them. Like I knew what they were saying to me, even though like their mouths didn't move. And then the people like who was there as participants myself, but it was like other folks from middle school and high school that I would not consider myself like friends with were there. And that's like one dream that just sticks with me. It's like, what am I hanging on to like about them? Why am I like still in a very deep subconscious thinking about them? But also, why the hell are we at a carnival? Like, what is going on? And I don't like, that's the other thing. I don't care for carnivals. So it's like, I'm in a place that I don't care to be in with folks I don't care to spend time and effort and energy with. And then there's these animals that somehow I am like they know my thoughts and I know theirs. What is happening?
What meaning did you extract from that, though?
I don't know if actually I've made.
And don't give me the fake answer. I need the real answer, because I know you've thought about this.
I don't even know if I've even made it to like trying to extract a meaning from it. It's just more that now that you've mentioned that, I think I've been stuck in the emotion of frustrated about it, and just like frustrated about like, why did I dream that? But if I have to think about it right now and like a deep meaning to extract it, is maybe that's how I felt a lot about middle school and high school, is that I was in this place, I was in this institution that I didn't want to be in with folks I didn't really want to spend time and energy with. I don't know who the animals are because they were my friends in the dream. Like they were the people that I felt comforted by. So, and I also am not necessarily a lover of animals. I'm so sorry if that offends anyone. I respect animals.
Right. Disclaimer.
Yeah. So it's not like I see myself having this natural connection with animals. Maybe that's what it is. And maybe.
But who are the people, though? Like, think about this, right? One of the things that I learned, like listening to Young, is when you have these dreams, you'll just think it's people, right? And you said it's people from your middle school or high school. But when you take a second to really think about it and put faces and make them reappear, like, who are those people?
The girls who didn't like me and the girls I didn't like.
Let's go deeper there. What girls? Are you sure it was other people?
I'm seeing this one girl's face. I won't say her name, but it started with a B, but it wasn't me. And she was definitely there.
Are you sure it wasn't you?
Okay, so this dream is like a couple years old. So now that I'm thinking about it, you know how memory can be a tricky thing? And sometimes we tell ourselves one time, that's the way that it happened. And then our mind will collude to make it happen that way. So now I'm over here doubting myself. Maybe for the last couple of years, I have created them to be who I wanted them to be. This is really deep.
It is, right? One of the things that Jung says is oftentimes when you really think about who the other people are, it's different aspects of you and your personality. What's fascinating, you said it was someone whose name starts with the B. Your name starts with the B. You know,
and you know what?
It could have been somebody else.
And you know what's also really fascinating is that I've done so much, not enough work, but I've done so much work thinking about myself in middle school and high school and really forgiving myself for not being the person that I wanted to be, right? Like I was definitely through middle school and most of high school, I was the person I thought other people wanted me to be. And which made me make some poor choices and just also some like really inauthentic choices. Like and again, like I can like laugh at my younger self and I can also forgive my younger self for things that I've done. But I don't want to say I didn't like my younger self because I think that's pretty unnecessary. So that's really interesting that you're saying that, because maybe that was me and my younger self, and it was the parts of me, you know, the part like the things I was embarrassed about, the parts of my identity that I would hide, you know, me like just trying to figure out my racial identity, identifying as Black, but being Black biracial. And like all of that language, there's like so much colorism that happened in my middle school and high school, ways like I have picked that up. But then also just thinking about the sexism and like the over sexualization that happened, wanting to be liked by boys, wanting to be liked by even like the same sex, like wanting to have friends, which I had really incredible friends. But, you know, there was always, for me, it was always that fear of, but tomorrow I might not have friends. Right. And that was like a deep fear.
Yeah, that's real. And it's fascinating because we started the conversation talking about identity. And this dream seems as if it's exploring your identity on a deep level that you needed to do to really resolve some things that might have been unresolved. And even looking at, you know, you felt comfortable having conversations with the animals. You said you're an introvert, right? To where you don't want to address the conversation with the people or the other identities that you might have. You're more comfortable being your authentic self with these other variations. So you could dive deeper into the types of animals that were there and all of those things. This dream work, it gets deep, but it's fascinating.
And it also, now that you said that too, also makes me think about, I've had to do so much work in my adult life to figure out my relationship with conflict and to have a healthy relationship with conflict. I think a part of my 9 being on the Enneagram was this idea of me being in, like, I wanted to be in a space that was quote unquote peaceful or easy. And so what would happen is, like, going back to what I was just saying, I would make choices that allowed other people to be more comfortable, which then caused a lot of discomfort at me. And I didn't know how to like advocate for myself. I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know how to say, you know what, if that's what you want to say or how you want to live your life, you know, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm going to physically remove myself from the situation. Like I didn't learn any of those advocacy skills growing up. And so it's so interesting that you said that about the animals, because I feel like that was maybe a level of avoidance, right? Of like, how do I then talk to myself? But that's still not going to create any change, right? Like what would have created change is maybe going and talking to the people and being like, hey, I'm having some really heavy feelings about this and I want to talk through it because maybe I'm just overthinking it, or maybe we just do need to make peace and go our separate ways.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it's important to be reflective. And a lot of my work has done with conflict and conflict resolution. And oftentimes people, when they think of conflict resolution, it's between other people. But I think when you get into the real work of it, it's resolving that internal conflict, right? And when you can resolve that internal conflict, you can have peace and harmony and all those things that you're looking for, which is a beautiful thing. And I just have to share that I can relate to your dream on so many levels. Like the recurring dream that I had was someone was breaking into my house in the base, and I had different levels. It wasn't my house, it was a house that I was in. And there was a robber breaking in, and he would start at the basement and work his way up. until he got to the top. And I would keep having this dream. And so I went to Jung, I went to dream interpretations, and I would always see 3 different people. I was like, I don't know who these people are. And then I was like, all right, if I have this dream, I'm going to try to figure out who these people are. And then I did it. And it was me. And when I really looked at the dream and just some of the different analysis, it was myself trying to break into like my subconscious to reveal some deep, dark secrets that I might have, whether it's imposter syndrome or whatever it is. And the different levels of the house were different levels of my thinking, and they were trying to break into. This is sounding like people might listen to this and be like, yo, this is different. But it's things that your body and your mind is trying to tell you so that you can resolve whatever it is. In real life, I was going through graduate school, working on my dissertation, and I was struggling. And I was like, I am an imposter. Like, I don't belong here. People are looking at me to be the expert. And I had to address those things. So, you know what? I think the point here is like we have to be able to pick up on these different symbols and clues and make sense out of it. We might know, but it should be something that we're constantly paying attention to.
I agree.
So, I love these type of conversations.
The self-reflection is important. The processing, I think a lot of times that's what's happening when we're sleeping. We're just processing. And then also just the work of not judging. Like, not judging our dreams, not judging our thoughts, not judging our emotions, but just allowing it to wash over us and acknowledge it, I think is like a whole nother level of work.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue. Let's talk about work. And just through reading through your website, it talks about transforming work into play. And so I would just love for you to break down that concept and what work means to you, work play means to you, and how we can transform that.
Yeah. So this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. Like I said, I'm a second generation teacher, and I've known that I wanted to be a teacher all my life. So when I was really, really young, we had a basement in our home, and I used to set all of my stuffed animals up on the tables. And I had each animal had a file folder, and my parents would come downstairs and like check them out, and I would tell them about their day. So I had approached teaching with playfulness because that's kind of the roots for me. My root was just playing with my stuffed animals and having a really good time. Then as you get older, you kind of go through the institution of education. People have a lot of ideas of what is work and why we work, the purpose of work and all of that. When I decided to leave the classroom in 2017, I came back to this idea of work and play and how I just now use them interchangeably. Because for me, both work and play should be intrinsically motivated. I think both of them involve our whole self. Oftentimes for work, for some people, they've like compartmentalized, like this is who I am when I show up to work and I'm a different person when I leave. Right. But in order for us to really be involved and to be our authentic selves, it has to involve our whole self. Our work and our play is also culturally responsive, which is why you see so much push for folks to have more representation in places of work, because the work you create will be culturally responsive. Both work and play require a great deal of concentration. I know you have young ones, but if you've ever watched a toddler play, if you've ever watched a preschooler play, they're in deep concentration making in their mud kitchen or building blocks or in their play kitchen, whatever they're doing with their cardboard box, like they're figuring something out. Both work and play allow us individually to become more independent thinkers and beers and doers. We're gaining skills as we're working, as we're playing, but it's not always done independently. And I think that's really beautiful, is that it can be very collaborative things, but it's allowing me to gain skills as I work with someone else and learn from someone else, listen from someone else, which is why a lot of educators, we believe in sociocultural educational theory. Right? We think that learning happens, work happens, play happens when we're around other people. I think that both work and play should require curiosity and persistence. And my dog Butter agrees. And then, so they both require curiosity and persistence. And then I think the biggest thing with work and play, they both have rules. Sometimes the rules are unwritten. Sometimes they're nonverbal rules. Sometimes the rules are changing. right? Especially like if you have a different administrator, if you have a different boss, a different supervisor, they may have some unwritten rules of how they want things to do. But also when we're playing with other people, right? When we're really young and we're playing, the way we build one building or castle or school or whatever that we're creating might be done differently than another set. So those rules kind of can always be changing, and we have to just have that flexibility and fluidity with it. And then I just approach my anti-racist work with the same principles, just emphasizing curiosity, joy, and that it should really involve my whole authentic self.
Now, Britt, can you talk a little bit? And I want to be selfish because I'm a parent. I told you I have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 8-month-old. And I'm down for any parenting tips and strategies I can get. And so can you talk a little bit about creating brave spaces at home? What are they and how do you create them?
So for brave spaces at home, well, I'll back up a little bit. So I started with this idea of safe space that oftentimes we'll hear a lot. You know, this is a safe space, and we'll like tell our students, our learners, that this is a safe space. And then I stumbled across some work around brave space versus safe space. And the idea of a brave space is one that's going to encourage learning. It's going to encourage truth and accountability. And a brave space allows people to be who they are and also held accountable for the opinions that they share, the things that they have picked up, the ideas and misconceptions that they've picked up so that they can grow. And so for a brave space, our ultimate goal is really for each person, each child to show up for their whole self. So I won't know all of the identities of my children, and they certainly don't know all of their identities yet. Because as we said in the beginning of the conversation, we're still mysterious beings and we're always rediscovering or discovering parts of us. And what I want my children to know is that in our home, you are safe to be who you are. But in order for me to create that actual safe space, we're going to have some bravery and some courage in order to have conversations. So for us in our home, we're always thinking about what prejudice have I picked up? What misconceptions have I picked up? I grew up in a home that I would absolutely consider as not only a very homophobic home, but also a very fat phobic home. Like there was a fear of becoming fat, not because of health implications, but because really how society bullies and mistreats fat folks who are large. And so I picked that up. So now like I'm doing that work in order to unlearn that, to put those things down. But also in our home, that means I'm very open with my children about how I was raised, how that does not align with our family values, my partner and myself, and that anyone can give us the gift of truth. So if my children see me, criticizing my body in a particular way or judging my body, they'll say, "Oh, Mom, I don't know if that's really how you mean to talk about your body." And I can be like, "Oh, thank you so much for that gift of truth. Let me rethink this," right? Or how can I turn this into an action, something sustainable that's not me just stuck in a problem and that like negative self-talk, right? When the pandemic had hit, our family, with a lot of folks had donated masks to our family. One of the masks was the Chicago Blackhawks mask. And so we're from Illinois. And there's things like I really normalized the logo or the past logo of a Native American, it's a caricature of a Blackhawk person, right? And so the mask had it. So anyways, we have this big bag of, masks, cloth masks that we can use. We were heading to the grocery store. We're in a hurry. And Carter, our oldest, who's now 15, was like taking forever. I'm like, "Carter, it's not a fashion show. Grab a mask. Let's go. Like, we're going to be right back." So I could just tell he was really upset about it in the car. I was like, "Hey, can you like invite me in? Can you tell me what's going on?" And he's like, "I don't want to wear this mask." And I look over at it and then I immediately got it. And I was like, "Can you tell me more?" And he's like, "It's racist. I don't want to go in the grocery store with a racist mask." So that's like creating a brave space that a loved one donated that mask to us. But he also had the ability to tell me like, "Really? We didn't want to like throw this mask away." And then for me to be like, "You're right. He's old enough. He can hang out in the car." I'm like, "Why don't you just hang out in the car? I'll go grocery shopping and then come back and then we'll get rid of that mask." But that's really what it means to create a brave space, is just having a value in your home, the expectation in your home that anyone can get the truth. Even us as parents, we can get the truth. and that we have zero tolerance for prejudice, for any kind of isms, discrimination in our home, for jokes, and anyone can get, the gift of truth and be held accountable once they share that opinion.
Anyone can get this gift of truth. In this conversation, in this podcast, I talk about being healing centered. And as you just beautifully laid out this concept of creating brave spaces, I see a lot of synergy and overlap with what my intention has been of creating space where we can have conversations that heal. So I would love if you could just share, and I know this might be emerging to you, but when you think of healing-centered conversations, like what does that mean to you?
Yeah, and I do definitely consider myself emerging in the conversation of healing-centered. I'm just in the last couple years, like listening and learning from folks like Dr. Sean Jenwright and also Dr. Farima Poor-Kishord. I probably said her last name incorrectly, but I know it's spelled Khorshid. And so like learning from them, but I really think about healing centered spaces as liberatory spaces, as emancipatory work that we're doing, where we're balancing both the conversations of oppression and trauma with conversations and the work of joy and liberation. And so oftentimes, like I think about that with anti-racist work, where folks just want to really focus on the oppression that people and communities have experienced, which again, it's a balance. We're not skipping over that. We have to go through it, but it's also at the same time, we're all complicated beings. And so while someone has also experienced trauma, they've also had, maybe wonderful birthday party celebrations or really great memories going to the park or, playing with their dad and playing basketball. And how do we balance both, right? It becomes an and that's how I see healing centered work, as an and instead of this or, and putting people in either you have experienced trauma or you haven't, or you are your trauma or you're not. And so one thing the educators I work with, I always tell them, especially lower elementary educators, I always tell them, children need to know they come from a place of power before we start sharing about the oppression their community experienced. And so often, like, whether we're starting the conversation, with slavery or with Jim Crow laws or with segregation, it's like, whoa, that's really starting the conversation from the white gaze and what happened to that community. But we have to balance that work. So for me, I guess, and again, I'm really emerging, and I know there's a lot that still needs to evolve from that idea.
You're an expert. You are an expert. I love it. Wow, that hit me deep. People must come from a place of power. Like, that is something that I have been trying to especially in my field of school psychology, as an educator, is shifting from this deficit-based negative thinking, like pessimistic thinking. And it doesn't mean that we ignore certain things. It's a more holistic approach, but also recognizing the power that we have, which is why I talk about understanding our strengths, being able to identify and name strengths, which is, I think, so important. But that is absolutely beautiful. I love that. One of the things that I saw you posted on social media, and I noticed a trend in a lot of your posts, is root for yourself. And so I would love if you can talk about the importance of rooting for yourself.
I wish I had I have like a rooting for you sweatshirt, and I wish I had that on right now, but
I need that. I need that.
I am always I am rooting for you. And I don't, probably since like 2016, 17, I've been, using this phrase, root for yourself, rooting for you. For me, I don't know where I picked it up, how I said it, kind of where I stumbled across it, but it's just this idea of having, honestly, radical self-love for ourselves and radical self-love for the parts of us that we're still trying to affirm. We're not there yet, but we're working on it. And it's also about being in solidarity with folks. It's this idea of like, I know that I'm an indispensable part of this world, of this community, of my family, and there's nothing that I can do about that, right? And so what does winning look like for me is a big question that I'll ask myself. And so that means, like, for me, winning, I start to think about, when I'm winning, how am I spending my time? How am I spending my energy, my effort? Who am I in relationship with? How am I spending my money? all of that, like I'm thinking about winning for me so that I can create a life that I can thrive. And for everybody, it's going to look and feel a bit different. But, when you start to root for yourself and you start to ask those questions, and then you start to build a life around those answers, to say traveling looks like winning for me, or taking naps, resting, sleeping looks like winning for me, or being able to on Saturdays, like go out into nature looks like winning for me. However that looks, then you start to root for yourself and say, then I'm going to start to create boundaries around that, expectations on my calendar, and actually block out time, right? That's going to create that. One question oftentimes I'll open up with when I work with educators. So we'll just do a check-in. And I'll say, is there anything anyone wants to acknowledge? We can acknowledge someone else. Anything we want to celebrate or hold space for. And when folks are just starting off with me, there's a lot of silence that happens because we have to practice that skill of how do I acknowledge someone for showing up, for covering my class because I was running late, or acknowledging someone for bringing soup for in the workroom, but oftentimes we have to also build that muscle of how do I also celebrate myself? And it can just be as simple as I want to celebrate the color that I'm wearing because I think I look really great in this color, right? It's stop overthinking it and thinking about what are the things that make us feel really good and start celebrating and sharing that.
And Britt, as we bring this episode to a close, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, I have a lot of closing thoughts, but I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I will say, the bulk of my work that I do is focused around anti-racism, and it's around creating liberatory spaces, emancipatory spaces in our homes, in our classrooms. And I just hope that folks that are listening to this, that are also on their journey of becoming anti-racist, are putting just the same amount of energy that we put into learning about the past is actually also creating a future that we want to build and we want to create, and have some aggressive change around that. I will say accountability is a gift. The truth is a gift. Mistakes belong here too. I think I'll say that too. Is that so often we're like thinking about perfection, and I don't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, right? And just allowing ourselves to know mistakes belong here too. They are welcomed in this space. And every time I make a mistake is every time I'm learning something. So I'm rooting for y'all.
Absolutely love this conversation. How can people find to get in touch with you?
Yeah, there's 2 ways that folks can get in touch with me. If you're more low key, then I would say just read along on Instagram at Britt Hawthorne. If you're someone who's saying, I want to raise anti-racist children in a very intentional way, then you can subscribe to my newsletter. It comes out every Saturday or Sunday, and it's just full of practical solutions, language, books to read, things to do. So those are the 2 best ways to connect with me.
Amazing. Britt, thank you so much for this healing-centered conversation where we now hold brave spaces. It's been everything. And we need to have a part 2 because I want to dive deeper into the concept of being an anti-racist educator and just more of your work. I want to talk more about you being a visionary, more about your book. We just have to have a part 2.
I agree.
if you're down.
I agree. I would love to be back. And I am both humbled and just like overjoyed to be on this podcast. You're doing incredible work, healing work that's just changing our lives, our hearts, and, healing the parts of us that we're still trying to reconnect with. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. We'll definitely keep this conversation going. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Healing Center Conversations podcast. Until next time, take care, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Center Conversations podcast, where we create space for conversations that heal. I'm your host, Dr. Byron McClure, a nationally certified school psychologist. I, along with our special guests, will give you insight to promote collective healing by putting people first. Through weekly conversations with educators, psychologists, and healers, we'll discuss ways to heal, thrive, and live your best life. This is the Healing Center Conversations podcast.